the only rule was Adi will not be involved and he won't come on camera. But eventually, I think it became very clear, and I think it became clear to him after much convincing. I think in terms of actors, I mean, of course, Amitabh Bachchan, Mr. Bachchan, Shah Rukh Khan, of course.
I know for most it's Shah Rukh and Kajol, but who is it for you?
I really want to say Shah Rukh and Kajol. I'm trying not to be so cliche and so predictable, but it's just...
Hi, this is Bhavna and you're watching India Today. When I first watched the trailer for The Romantics, I was very excited to see my childhood unfold in front of me in those 3 minutes, and I have the director with me right here, and I'm extremely excited to talk to Smriti Mundhra here. Firstly, a huge welcome to India itself, because you've flown down specially to be able to do this, so thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
And Smriti, I have to first compliment the fact that, I know this is not an easy job to have like 31 actors come, interview them, to manage their schedules, because we know how difficult it can be. I want to first take you to the day when you first decided, when you got this offer to be able to do this. What was that day like? What happened?
It wasn't so much a offer that I got. It was an idea that I had that I pitched to the studio and, told them that, I wanted to do something that was sort of a retrospective of Hindi cinema and the most iconic films. And of course, so many of the most iconic films are Yash Raj films, Yash Chopra's films. And, the story of the studio itself was also really interesting, and how it came to be, and, the evolution of Yash Raj films and all of that. So I, pitched them the idea to do a docuseries on it, and asked them to give me access to all of the archives, all the behind the scenes, the makings, all of the stories, of the makings of these films. And they were very gracious to allow me to do that. And that's really how it started.
Wow. And when was this? Which year was this? Because you also have Rishi Kapoor a part of this, which means that this must have been shot before 2020.
Yeah, it was the research and the sort of preparation started in 2019, and then we did some filming in 2020. Particularly there were some people we wanted to film, as they became available, because, like you said, scheduling, was always a challenge. So yeah, we were very, very fortunate to get Mr. Rishi Kapoor's last interview a month before his demise.
I can only imagine. I mean, so many memories came rushing in when I watched the trailer, because, and I like the fact that it started with the line that, what do you think of the term Bollywood? Because, I mean, of course, in the West, Bollywood is thought of, you have a stereotype when it comes to that. As someone who has been a part of this journey, what do you see a shift now in the way West is also sort of looking at films, Hindi cinema in general?
Absolutely. I mean, I think over the years, there's been a real recognition, globally and particularly in the West, that the Indian film industry, including Hindi cinema, the Hindi film industry, is a juggernaut. The stars are arguably bigger than any stars we have in Hollywood. The films are bigger, the dedication of the audiences is bigger, and there's a real ingrained theater-going, cinema-going culture that's in our DNA. And I think there's been a real recognition of that, and by extension, a recognition that the style of films that we make in India are different, unique, and sort of compelling in their own right. And so I think the comparisons to Hollywood have hopefully diminished and will continue to diminish. And I think maybe that's part of the reason that people are resistant, rightfully so, to be sort of defined in the shadow of Hollywood, because Indian cinema is its own thing.
I agree. But I want to know, like I said, 31 stars, interviewing them, managing their schedules, which was the toughest of all to crack, because I can only imagine sometimes you have to like follow up for a long time, make them believe that it is going to be okay. It is going, make them believe in your conviction as well. Were there days where it was very difficult?
Of course, coordinating the schedules of so many big stars, who have so many things going on is a challenge. Thankfully, we had an incredible production team that managed all of that and shielded me from all the difficulties of that. But I will say, I think everyone was really eager and to participate and very generous with their time because of the love and regard for Yash Chopra and the legacy he left behind in Hindi cinema.
Yeah.
So I think, there was really no question. There was nobody who was reluctant to participate. I think
That's
everyone
so
was very
sweet.
eager, yeah.
That's so sweet. But who was a revelation for you? Because we have only seen them on screen. Meeting them and knowing their stories in person can be a very different experience completely. Who took you off guard?
I was surprised and really delighted to see that all of the people that we spoke with gave a lot of insights and actually had a lot of expertise on the film industries, not just from their perspective as stars and on the films that they were a part of, but as fans and as people who have been part of this industry for many years, many decades often. So they had lots of insights to share, and I think it was just about asking the right questions,
Right.
and it was nice to speak to people who weren't necessarily promoting a project or, it was a different sort of a vibe,
Yeah.
It was very every interview was sort of a vibe of reminiscing and, remembering anecdotes and personal experiences working with Yash Chopra and working with Aditya Chopra as well, but also just their own experiences as young people, as being fans of Hindi cinema and then later becoming part of the industry. So it was a good balance.
But is there one person or one story which really took you off guard? Because I'm really bracing myself for so many stories to come out and for so many anecdotes to be a part of, our journey now as in Hindi cinema lovers. But was there something that really blew your mind and you were like, oh my God, this is amazing. Thank God I did this.
Yeah. No, I think, the parts that were the most surprising and interesting to me was the stars sharing their personal anecdotes about as fans of cinema. So Ayushmann Khurrana talking about the first time he saw DDLJ in a theater in Chandigarh,
Yeah.
and Shah Rukh Khan talking about, trying to manage tickets, in Delhi, when he was a kid to go see movies. And, those sort of memories were really interesting because, sometimes you forget these are the biggest stars in the world and
Yeah.
you forget that they're actually first fans
Yeah.
of cinema and love movies, going to the movies, and to hear them recount those memories was really the most delightful.
What made you a fan of Yash Chopra films or Hindi cinema in general?
It was something that I grew up with. I grew up with Hindi films, and especially as an NRI kid, as a diaspora kid who was raised predominantly in the U.S., Hindi films was my connection, to my roots. And I was luckier than most in that I got to travel. I lived in India when I was a kid, and I traveled here a lot when
Yeah.
I was growing up. But for most of us, who grew up in the West, this was our connection. This is how we learned to speak Hindi. This is how we
Yeah.
learned about our festivals and our holidays and, our traditions and all of that. And sometimes we even got a little bit of a skewed perspective of what India is like and what,
Sure.
what Indian
Especially
people,
with
yeah.
Yash Raj films, you do that.
Yeah,
Because
yeah.
you're like, oh my God, this looks lovely. And then you come here and you're like, okay.
Yeah, exactly. You expect every wedding to be a big Punjabi wedding and everything, yeah. So we definitely got a little bit of a rosy tinted perspective
Yeah.
of what life was like, in a typical Indian family. But it was our way of connecting from, thousands of miles away of connecting to our roots, and that was for that reason it was always very important to me.
I mean, Yash Raj films is synonymous to love.
Yeah.
The reason why it's called romantics
Yes.
as well, I'm sure. Which is your favorite Yash Raj film, though, if I may ask?
I have to say Chandni.
Really?
Yeah.
So sweet. Yeah.
Chandni, yeah, that film. I mean, it's so difficult to choose because there's so many films, but Chandni is the one that I find myself going back to over and over again. I just watched it again last week. I had
Wow.
no reason to. There was no, the series is done. I
Yeah.
don't have to do any more research or preparation. But that's a film that I go back to again and again, just because it's like a delight to watch it, and the songs are incredible, and Sridevi's performance is unmatched. So that I would say that
I
if I
can
had to
only
choose one, that would be the one.
And what was it like to have, because there are so many stories, so many anecdotes that must have been shared by the actors, to concise it and make it into
Yeah.
a docu-series in itself is a challenge, because I know sometimes you have such a lovely chat. You don't want to edit any part
Yes.
of it, but you have to, I mean, because
Yeah.
that's how it is meant to be. So how do you decide when you finally sat?
Yeah.
to decide that, okay, this can be a part of the series and this we will unfortunately have? How difficult was that?
Incredibly difficult, incredibly difficult. We had over 100 hours of interview, you know, in
Oh my
aggregate.
God.
So, and each one, I mean, I really mean this sincerely, each one was excellent and just packed with great insights and details and anecdotes. And it was really, really challenging to narrow that down, all of that down into 4 one-hour episodes. But, you know, I think ultimately it came down to, I wish there was so much more I wish I could have included, but it came down to the larger story. You know, we had to essentially fit not just 50, but really 70 years, you know, of history, cinema history, and the history of the studio and all of these movies into 4 hours. So every interview that we used, every bite from every interview we used had to advance the story in some way. So it was difficult. It was a big challenge, you know, and there's a lot that broke my heart, you know, to have to leave out. But you know, it'll all be in the archives, you know.
I'm sure.
50 years from now, somebody else will find all those interviews and maybe do something with them.
But to have Aditya Chopra, I mean, that's the biggest highlight, right?
Yeah.
To have him on camera and finally speak about the legacy for the first time ever.
Yeah.
What was that day like? Because to convince him, or rather have him finally do it. I mean, you know, what were the do's and don'ts, and how did you manage that day? I want to understand.
You know, it was the convincing part was definitely a challenge because when I started this project and I approached the studio about making the series, they said, "Great, go ahead, love the idea, go for it. We'll give you full access to the archives, talk to whomever you want." You know, there was absolutely no restriction of any kind, no input of any kind. The only rule was Adi will not be involved and he won't come on camera. But eventually, you know, I think it became very clear, you know, and I think it became clear to him after much convincing that any story that is the sort of definitive story about the legacy of his father and the studio that they built together and includes, you know, his mother's perspective and his brother's perspective, it would feel incomplete without his perspective. And if there was ever a time for him to speak, you know, this would be it, you know. And I think really, you know, if I could purport to say, you know, I'll speak on his behalf because I don't know if he'll ever speak.
He's not going to speak after this for sure.
But I think maybe it was because, you know, of, again, the reverence, you know, and respect for his father and to pay tribute to his legacy that he agreed to finally do it. So
no, because I am really excited to finally have, because it's, and we are not kidding when we say this, we have been to YRF Studios so many times, but he's an enigma.
Yeah.
Like we still don't know where he is and what is he doing, but we are sure that he's doing something really great at the end of it. But we have also seen YRF Studios evolved over the period, right? What is your favorite era, if I may say? Because, you know, from, like you said, from having those sweet vision for Indian cinema to now Pathan, like an action spy thriller that we are going to see, they have evolved with time. While keeping the essence of Hindi cinema intact. But if you had to pick a favorite era, what would that be?
I think if I was to pick an era for the studio, I would say probably the mid 2000s when there was Hum Tum, Veer Zara and Dhoom, because it showed that era showed such incredible range, you know, of the studio. You know, you had sort of the classic, you know, Yash Raj romance. You had sort of a young, you know, rom-com, you know, type of story, and then you had something totally different, you know, which was an action film, which, you know, we hadn't really seen in Hindi cinema at that time, and was so new and fresh and different. And for all of those films to come out in the same sort of period was really exciting, you know, for me, because it really showed the range of the studio, but also the range of what's possible, you know, under the umbrella of Hindi cinema. There's romance at the core, but there's also, you know, something much beyond that.
I agree. But Smriti, when you even started on this project, I want to know, because there are so many actors you had to interview, but there are certain actors you knew that they have to be there. If they are not there, then this cannot happen. You know, even at a script level, perhaps. Who, if I had to ask you, those 5 actors, you knew that you had to get them on board, who were they?
I think in terms of actors, I mean, of course, Amitabh Bachchan, Mr. Bachchan, Shah Rukh Khan, of course,
I mean.
Rishi Kapoor, And I would say, then I would say Uday Chopra, of course, being both an actor and obviously Yash's son, and Pam Chopra. These are like the absolute, I think it's very difficult to choose because so many people played such instrumental roles in the story of Yash Raj films, but these few people, were covered a lot of the story and were had both personal relationships and key role to play in the professional, and sort of the growth of the studio. So, and the most iconic films.
What was your biggest learning that you took from each of these conversations that you have had? Because it's enriching. Like even when I'm talking to you, there's something that I will take away from this conversation.
Yeah, of course.
But to have someone who have lived a journey on screen of more than 30 years, and in Amit Ji's and Rishi Ji's case, like decades. In fact, what was your biggest learning?
I think for Rishi Kapoor, from him, I really understood the way that Yash Chopra worked with his actors and his talent, and the environment that he created on sets and on his films, that inspired actors to give their best performances. From Mr. Bachchan, he really talked, really eloquently about Yash Chopra's range, going from Diwar to Kabhi Kabhi, just in a year, his range as a filmmaker. From Shah Rukh Khan, definitely the sort of paternal, role that Yash Chopra played in the industry, and also just his ability to evolve with times and, for his films, as he was getting older, for his films to get consistently younger and younger, and he could still really capture that pulse. And then of course from, Uday and Pamji, just the personal behind the scenes stuff, what he was like as a father, as a husband, his insecurities also, his innermost personal thoughts, because of course didn't have the opportunity, for this series to speak directly with Mr. Yash Chopra, but his family members really gave that insight, in a really beautiful way.
While even I'm talking to you as someone who's a romantic by heart myself, I feel like, oh God, when I am really excited to watch this, but because it is called The Romantics, I have to also ask you your favorite Jodi, the most romantic Jodi according to you in Hindi cinema. I know for most it's Shah Rukh and Kajol, but who is it for you?
I really want to say Shah Rukh and Kajol. I'm trying not to be so cliche and so predictable, but it's just, it's like, it's unmatched. It's unmatched. Right? It's so good. It's so good. I would also say, okay, I'll say this. I think Shah Rukh and Kajol is like an absolutely evergreen, unparalleled, enduring match on screen. But I think the more modern era, the one that really excited me, to see was, because it was just so different and fresh, was Ayushmann Khurrana and Bhumi Pednekar in Dam Laga Ke Haisha. Yeah, it's just like I had never seen a film like that in Hindi cinema that was still sort of a romantic film that still had, but just the characters were so different. They had such great on-screen chemistry. Both of them are such incredible actors, and I think really carry forward the mantle of the Yash Raj hero and heroine in a totally new and fresh way. So I would say of the modern time, that was one that was very exciting for me to see.
Do you think a Yash Raj movie, which apart from DDLJ I know it resonates worldwide, but apart from that, because you have stayed predominantly in LA, in the US, which is that one film which still resonates with them apart from that, and which is that one film you think if remade in keeping today's context in mind, it will do wonders?
I think I would say maybe Diwar. That film is a classic. I still hear all over the world, people saying that line, "Mere paas maa hai," all the time. And just in terms of a story, and the layers and the nuance of the story and everything, I think it's one that, if remade today, I think it would be really still very relevant.
Do you have actors in mind, perhaps, for that?
No, I don't know. That's tough. That's a tall order, to match up to those performances. I would not. I would not envy whoever has to fill those shoes. But
That would be crazy.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah.
Now, before I let you go, I have to ask you this: that it's not just Adi that you managed to get on screen. It's also like people like Salim Khan.
Yeah.
He also doesn't give interviews. Uday Chopra, he doesn't give too many interviews. Or
Yeah.
Ranbir Kapoor still is trying to sort of now give interviews, but it's very difficult to get him
Yeah.
on board as well. But how did you manage to convince like a Salim Khan, or what was that conversation like? Because he doesn't open up so easily. How do
Yeah.
you make them open up?
I think the magic words was Yash Chopra. There is so much, I mean, I can't overstate this, how much love and affection and regard and respect the industry has for Yash Chopra. I mean, he's somebody who's both personally and professionally. Of course, he's held in such high esteem as a filmmaker, as one of the great auteurs, of our industry. But more than that, personally, there's so much love for him, and he was so generous with his time and his spirit with so many generations of people, that it really, I can't take any credit, honestly, for convincing people to talk, or
No,
I
but
think really it
kudos
was
to you as
him.
well.
Thank you.
I mean, because it cannot happen until and unless they believe in the director themselves. So
Thank you.
it
Yeah.
has to do with you as well. But now, before I let you go, of course, you have also directed Never Have I Ever and Seema Auntie Ka Matlab Indian Matchmaking. I want to know, how are you approaching your role as a director? Like, what is it that you also want to do next? Because docu-series and of course a reality show in ways, I mean,
Yeah.
Indian matchmaking is that in one way, and then Never Have I Ever, which is also one of my favorite shows. So different genres you have dabbled in. Now what next do you want to do?
In terms of genre, I would love to do a thriller.
Oh, yeah.
Next. That would be really fun. That's something I've never done before, and I haven't. But I love. I think some of my favorite films are thrillers. But in a bigger picture sense, my motivation as a filmmaker and as a storyteller is to tell the stories of our people, whether it's of India or the diaspora. My perspective, as somebody who's existed in both worlds and both cultures, that's what motivates me. And I think there's so much there, and now there's finally, after so many years, because of OTTs, because of Netflix and different platforms, there is a global audience for these stories. And this is something that I've waited my whole life, my whole career for, this time where the storytelling meets the market. And so it's exciting for me. It's like almost like a gold rush, where you can tell so many different kinds of stories, so many different aspects of our culture. And so now, I've tackled marriage and family. I've tackled cinema, and I don't know what's next. Maybe cricket.
You never know. And that would be again so different. And so because I was when I shared the trailer on my Instagram, and a friend who stays in actually South Korea, she was excited for
Great.
this. So you like when you mentioned global audiences, I know that there is an audience now which is not just limited to US, UK, and India. It's worldwide.
Everywhere.
And that's so good.
Yeah, everywhere.
And hopefully with this, it's just going to go more and more, and it will grow by leaps and bounds. And thank you so much, Smriti.
Thank you.
For telling this story, and I am waiting for your next story to come out.
Thank you
very
so
soon.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.